In part 1, I dealt with the origins of religion. In this one, I will also deal with the origins of religion. I had to change my plans because the things I wanted to present in this one was just too much for one presentation. So there will be an Origins 3, and after that, we'll change tacks a bit. There are many different definitions of religion. The one I am using for this presentation is from Rossano. Beliefs or actions dependent on the existence of supernatural entities that can intervene in or otherwise affect human affairs. Four mental attributes that appear to support the cognitive foundations for religion are agency detection and causal attribution, social and emotional commitments of group living, narrative formation, and existential anxiety, and ecstatic or mystical experience. These will be dealt with one-on-one. Agency detection is a type of causal attribution in which a creature attributes another's actions to an internal state such as intention. A simple form of this was likely in our ancestors. From about 1.8 million years ago, the time of Homo erectus, it is likely that hominids were sophisticated enough that the only primary competitors were other hominids. The ability to detect agency would have been a huge advantage. Those who could quickly and accurately read signals of help or harm would survive. It is adaptive for us to overassign agency, which led to our hyperactive agent detective device, or HAD. It is less costly for us to overassign agency. Natural processes with no apparent explanation thus became easy to explain via the supernatural. Social and emotional commitment is another mental attribute of the religious mind. Certain emotions may be unique to humans and evolved to promote social cohesion. Today, religion uses social emotion, like embarrassment, to enhance social bonding, so there's no reason to think it was ever any different. Episodic memory deals with autobiographical data. It allows a person to mentally travel back in time or project into the future. This is a form of consciousness known as Autonoetic Consciousness. Autonoetic consciousness and language grants us the ability to create the two types of religious narrative, personal and theological. The personal is built on one's experiences and brings with it existential anxiety. Theological narratives are concepts and myths that communities construct to comprehend the relationship between the natural and supernatural. Ecstatic states are ASCs induced by sensory deprivation, overstimulation, physical or emotional stress, and/or psychoactive substances. Rituals to induce ecstatic states are used to enhance social bonds among hunter-gatherer groups. The release of opioids is essential to this process. James identified four qualities of these experiences. Ineffability, the experience can't be described in words. Noetic quality, while emotional, these states also provide insight to the person who is participating. Transience, the temporary state of ecstasy, and passivity, ASC occurrence is spontaneous. Scholars have illuminated some parameters of how the mind formulates and conveys religious concepts. One such parameter is that these stories are minimally counterintuitive. That is, exemplars retain most of their class characteristics with the violation of one or a few. For example, the Virgin Mary is a female in every way except how she conceived. The HAD, Hyperactive Detective device, along with our highly social emotions, is fertile ground for believing in spiritual overseers. Moralizing gods appear to assist in keeping social order. We may never know when the first religious ideas were propagated, but experts believe, based on art artifacts and burial practices, that religion was in place by the Upper Paleolithic. Because UP people were anatomically modern humans, this is a sound conclusion. There is evidence for some religious ideas, proto-religion, prior to UP, but only for bonding. No evidence exists for religion among non-human primates, but some essential elements do exist. For instance, chimps live in communities that often split into smaller foraging parties. When they meet again, they engage in ritual behavior. Mutual grooming releases opioids that act as bonding agents. This indicates that the foundations of religion were possibly in the primate brain before our split. Other evidence that hits at pre-Upper Paleolithic religion is cannibalism, early symbols like use of red ochre, and deep cave exploration. Among hunter-gatherers, past and present, eating the flesh of the deceased is seen as ingesting his or her spirit. This practice applied to enemies, but more importantly to tribal members. A fellow member would be eaten to keep his or her skills within the group. Homo erectus skulls excavated from a cave near Beijing suggests this practice dates back to at least 500,000 years. Signs of ancient cannibalism have been documented worldwide. Red ochre is an iron oxide used for pigment. In hunter-gatherer societies, it is used extensively in rituals and has symbolic meaning. The first evidence for the use of red ochre can be found in Aldewan sites dating back almost 1 million years. The Aldewan dates back to 2.5 to 1.2 million years ago and refers to the oldest known tool industry. Some Neanderthal deep cave sites might show some evidence of ritual. In a cave in southwestern France, it appears that Neanderthals arranged stalagmites into two circles surrounded by the remains of a fire. These remains date to around 50,000 years ago. This evidence is not conclusive for pre-UP religion, but it suggests that some behavior went beyond utilitarian. In Europe, indications for sophisticated tools, hunting, and symbolism appear rather suddenly about 40,000 years ago. But in Africa, the transition was more gradual, dating back to 250,000 years ago. Homo sapiens evolved around 300,000 years ago. With the modern human brain came things like memory, manipulation, and interpretation. This, in turn, brought the supernatural. The present model indicates that this was the beginning of shamanism. An interaction between human minds and complex societies comprises the last stage of the evolution of religion. UP societies changed from egalitarian hunter-gatherers to more complex societies. Complex hunter-gatherer societies store abundant resources, allowing for a more sedentary lifestyle, private ownership, and increasing social stratification. The move to a more complex society led to increasing exclusive religious rituals and worship of ancestors, which in turn created the need for narrative about how the supernatural world correlated with the natural. Ancestor worship is a near universal trait of traditional religions. It also necessitates coherent narratives. The ancestors represent a link between human and supernatural worlds. Private ownership in these societies includes resource-rich territory and belongs to families based on lineage. This is the beginning of an elite class. This elite class justifies their status by relationships to these powerful ancestors that provide for all the tribe. This was not only the beginnings of the social elite, but the religious elite as well, since rituals only open to the social elites can satisfy these powerful ancestors. Religious narrative supplies myths that defends against social disintegration and helps people through life. Just as ancestors provided wealth, descendants ensure it. Thus, an emphasis on fertility began. The Venus figurines date to this time. Another piece of evidence that leads us to believe that fertility became increasingly important is that this is the first time in history that females were buried with grave goods. This indicates a rise in their social status. Grave goods are goods that are buried with the deceased. Today they are often symbolic, but in ancient times they were meant to be used by the deceased in the afterlife. I discussed this in part 1, so I'm just going to give you a bit more information. Some researchers have linked mammalian rites to the much more specific human ritual, citing this as the origin of religion. Several conclusions can be drawn about ritual, the main one being that it is communication. Rituals are marked by exaggerated formality, sequencing, invariability, and repetition. The rituals laid the foundation for social groups by communicating honest messages and allowing clear communication of intent. Rituals reinforce individual commitment to group values. Ritual healing theorists posit that religious rituals elicit distinct, autonomic nervous system responses and conditionally pair these responses with abstract stimuli. The autonomic nervous system is the part of our nervous system that we usually cannot consciously influence. It is in charge of such things as breathing, blood pressure, and heartbeat. The system quickly adapts to change, such as making you sweat when you get hot. As always, leave your comments in the comment section. You can catch me on Twitter. And as always, stay curious, my friends, and never be afraid.